Gamescom 2024 recently came to a close, and after the death of E3, this seems to be the largest in person convention in the industry right now. Until last year, Gamescom used to sit in a weird spot in the calendar where it was too late to announce new games releasing in the same year and too early to announce new games coming out next year. So poor Gamescom used to be left with focusing on games that were already announced. This year, however, things have changed quite a bit, with multiple world premiere trailers being showcased at Gamescom. I guess part of the reason is that the summer showcase events have become way too crowded, and the Game Awards show in December is also quite crowded, so Gamescom currently feels like an unexplored area. However, it still has a long way to go before filling the gap left by E3, at least in terms of anticipation and excitement. With that said, let's have a look at some of the announcements made at Gamescom that I felt were worth highlighting. These include a mixture of new and previously announced games. Probably the biggest among the new game announcements, Borderlands 4 was teased with no gameplay shown. The game is set to come out sometime in 2025, which means Take-Two Interactive is now guaranteed to make a record profit next year, with both GTA 6 and Borderlands 4 coming out the same calendar year. Borderlands 4 is coming out for PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. Notably, it is launching day 1 on Steam, which has been the topic of a lot of discussion. Borderlands 3 famously drew a lot of criticism for not launching on Steam and being an Epic Game Store exclusive back in 2019. The game did eventually come to Steam, and with Borderlands 4 launching day 1 on Valve's store, it is clear that Steam continues to be the dominant force in PC gaming. Next up is Goat Simulator Remastered, a game that no one asked for, but one that die-hard fans will surely play on day 1. To me, the most surprising fact about this trailer was to learn that the first Goat Simulator game came out 10 years ago. It's not as if this franchise has had several games. The second game came out just 2 years ago. So it's interesting that the developers chose to do a remaster instead of a sequel. Either way, if you're a fan of the Sandbox franchise where you play as a goat, the remaster comes out later this year for the PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S, while being a day 1 release on Game Pass. Next up is Dying Light the Beast. This is a standalone title set in the same universe as Dying Light, and it replaces the second DLC that was originally planned for Dying Light 2. Apparently, the game grew too big to be a DLC, so the developers turned it into a standalone title instead. However, owners of the Ultimate Edition of Dying Light 2 will get this game for free. If that was not confusing enough, the game continues the story of Dying Light 1's protagonist Kyle Crane, but it is set after the events of Dying Light 2. I haven't played any of these games, so I'm just reading from a script here, but I felt this announcement was worth highlighting because a DLC being converted into a standalone game isn't something that you see every day. Usually, developers just push out the DLC and dust their hands off the project. But Techland liked this DLC enough to change their plans entirely and convert it into a full game. That's really interesting. There's no release date for this game yet, but you can wishlist the game now on Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation stores. Now let's switch gears and look at a peaceful game about herding animals. Herdling is a game about climbing a mountain along with a herd of beasts called calicons. It looks like you will be solving some puzzles along the way, and the Steam description mentions some threats as well, although we don't know if any sort of combat mechanics are involved or you're just meant to hide. Overall, it looks like a fun adventure set in a beautiful world, and I'm eager to learn more about it. The game is set to be released in 2025 for PC and consoles. Next up is a game from industry veteran Peter Molyneux. This man has a bit of a bad reputation in the online communities who always either seem to make fun of him or outright abuse him. The reason for this is that over the span of his career, he has made several big claims and has almost always under-delivered. This time, he is back with a game that looks quite similar to one of his early creations, Black and White. This game is called Masters of Albion, and it seems to be a mixture of a god game and a tower defense game. By day, you control what goes on in your world, and by night, you have to defend against waves of enemies. Given the developer's reputation, it's probably best to wait for more details before passing judgment. The game is available for wishlisting on Steam and currently doesn't have a release date. Another showcase, another trailer for Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. This one is a bit different because it is narrated by Troy Baker, the actor who plays Indy in the game. Apart from that though, it played out like the other trailers we've seen for the game. The biggest news, however, has nothing to do with the gameplay or story. It was announced that the game will release for the PS5 in 2025, meaning it will only be a timed exclusive for the Xbox consoles in 2024. This is not entirely surprising since Indiana Jones is a huge brand and it will no doubt sell really well on the PS5. So it would make for some easy sales for Xbox. However, this announcement once again started the debate around why one would buy an Xbox console if they can get all the first-party games on PC and PS5 eventually. I don't want to spend too much time on this issue, but I'll just say that you need to look at your own situation and take a decision, and not based on what the market tells you to do. Anyway, Indy and the Great Circle comes out for Xbox consoles and PC on December 9th, 2024 and for PS5 later in 2025. Next up is Lonely Mountains Snow Riders. This was a game that I was quite happy to see because the developer's previous game, Lonely Mountains Downhill, was like a breath of fresh air when it came out. Snow Riders takes the same formula as the previous game but makes two important changes. First, it is now set in a snowy landscape, so instead of a bike, you need skis to go down the mountain. And second, you are no longer lonely. The game introduces multiplayer, which can be either cooperative or competitive. This felt a bit odd because the title has the word lonely in it, but I guess the demand for multiplayer took greater priority rather than the name making sense. Anyway, you can still have a completely solo experience of the game and even stop whenever you want to admire the scenery. And for others who would like to play with friends, they can do that too. The game is currently announced only for PC but is likely to come out for consoles later. The PC release date is set for later this year. Then we have another sequel, Revenge of the Savage Planet. I remember playing the first game, Journey to the Savage Planet, for a couple of hours before getting bored, but the game had its own set of fans. The sequel is bringing back the same brand of humor and sci-fi action and expanding it to 4 planets this time, and also switching from first person to third person. This game's development has had a long story of its own. Basically, the game's original development studio, Typhoon Games, was bought by Google Stadia with the intention to develop huge games that could only be run using Google's cloud tech. However, Stadia got shut down and along with it went Typhoon Games. Some of the employees, including the founders, came together to form a new studio called Raccoon Logic. They negotiated with Google to get back rights to the Savage Planet IP, and 3 years later, here we are with a new game almost ready to come out. Revenge of the Savage Planet is set for release sometime in 2025 and will be available for PC and consoles. Next up is Let's Build a Dungeon, the new game from Spring Loaded, the makers of Let's Build a Zoo. In this new game, your task is to build a successful MMO from the ground up, and that means you first need to deal with the intricacies of building a game studio. This is something I would definitely want to play on day one, as I like game dev simulators quite a bit. The last well-known hit in this subgenre was Game Dev Tycoon, which came out all the way back in 2013. Let's Build a Dungeon seems to be expanding on that idea, but also wants to be more focused. Instead of developing any game that you like, the main story's focus is on building an MMO. There's a separate creative mode that hops on to the user-generated content trend by allowing you to make your own games and share them with other players. The game has currently been announced for PC and Xbox with no release date in sight. Next up is Double Exposure, the latest title in the Life is Strange series. This is also sort of a sequel to the very first game, as it continues the story of that game's protagonist, Max Caulfield. In the first game, Max was able to rewind time to take the story forward. This time, her powers have changed to allow her to switch between dimensions in order to help her solve a murder mystery. Dimension hopping gameplay is a mechanic that can quickly get tiring if not done right, so I hope that Deck 9 games will stick the landing. One annoying thing to note is that the game is hopping onto the play early trend by asking users to buy the Ultimate Edition, which will allow them to play 2 chapters of the game 2 weeks early. Apart from this perk, the Ultimate Edition only offers a bunch of cosmetic items but costs $30 more than the base game, which is hilarious. But it doesn't seem that surprising when you see that the publisher is Square Enix, who is well known for chasing trends often to disappoint players. The game comes out on 29th October for PC and consoles. The first time I saw 2 Point Hospital, I honestly thought it was a generic asset flip. But of course that was not the case, and it soon became a franchise with the release of 2 Point Campus. Now it is expanding and coming back in the form of 2 Point Museum. The concept is still the same. You are put in charge of managing your own properties, this time in the form of museums. You can carefully plan the various ways in which to delight and terrorize your customers. You can also send a team of archaeologists on expeditions to bring new exhibits for your museums. On the surface, it just seems like a standard 2-point game, which is no doubt more than enough for hardcore fans. The game has been announced for PC and consoles and doesn't have a release date yet. I guess I was not alone in expecting to get more news about Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 at Gamescom, given that it is scheduled to launch this November. And I guess I was not alone in being surprised to instead get a lengthy trailer about a new update for the old Flight Simulator game. You know, the one that came out in 2020. The new trailer showcasing World Update 18 was impressive in its own right, but with the new game coming out in November, it is really strange that we barely got any new information about it. So if you're interested in checking out the new update for the old Flight Simulator game, it is available right now, and to be fair, it looks quite good. Would you be interested in playing the Dark Souls of climbing games? That's what the game bakers, developers of Cairn, would like to call their upcoming title. Last year saw the release of the excellent Juzon, and now Cairn seems eager to build on that momentum by offering a more complex and challenging climbing experience. You can plan your own route to the top and have to face a lot of challenges thanks to the inclusion of survival game mechanics where you need to manage your food, water and other resources while climbing. I'm not entirely sold on this idea, especially because Juzon offered such a relaxing experience, but if you are among those who would like a more brutal and realistic climbing game, then Cairn might just be the title for you. It is coming out sometime in 2025 for PC and consoles. Last but not the least, we got a bit more insight into Avowed, the RPG from Obsidian Entertainment that was recently delayed to February 18, 2025. while the actual update at Gamescom was that we got to see an entire level's worth of gameplay, which got some praise from the media. The core discussion around the game was the news that it would run at 30 FPS on consoles, even on the Series X. One of the developers tried to explain the reason behind this decision, something along the lines of, you don't really need 60 FPS in a first-person story-based game, but the audience just didn't buy it. Developers might try to argue that a steady 30 FPS is better than an unstable 60 FPS, but players always appreciate being given a choice, instead of being forced to stick to a certain option. Besides, the real reason might be that the developers need more time to get the game's performance mode to run smoothly. Instead of delaying the game's launch, they may have delayed the optimization part of the development cycle and may release a patch later. Only time will tell. And there you have it, a brief selection of titles that were showcased at Gamescom. Like always, there are many more titles that I have not talked about, but this is just my list of games to keep an eye on. Historically, recap videos have not performed very well on this channel, so I stopped worrying about cramming in a lot of games and instead chose to make this video for myself as a reminder of the games that I want to keep track of. If you made it till the end, do let me know what games you are looking forward to. Thanks for watching and see you in the next episode.